Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Hi, and thank you for joining another video by me, FlowJo. Today we are going to be looking at the Azure Cognitive Services voice profiles and how you can get lifelike voices into your applications. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, you may want to build out accessibility, or you simply may want to have voices in your application speak some commands or just guide users through your application. Now, let's look at our bots. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm an American English voice profile.
I'm Leah, super excited to be here today, and I'm a South African voice profile.
And hello everyone, I'm Connor, an Irish voice profile.
We're
all generated from the Azure Cognitive Services.
Bonjour, et nous sommes français.
Ah, bonjour, yes, thank you for reminding me. We will also be looking at French voice profiles. So we'll be looking at how we can do additional languages into our application as well. But firstly, we are looking at the English voice profiles, and let's take a look at our application. Okay, so this is our application. It's very simple. It's a data entry application for FlowJo's text store. It accepts the first name, last name, email, phone, and then there's a terms and conditions checkbox, a join our mailing list checkbox, which is automatically ticked, a submit button, and there is a settings cog, but I'll touch upon that later. So the situation is this. We are working with FlowJo's text store, and they want to implement some accessibility features because they have customers that come in that are partially blind, and they want to be able to enable those individuals to fill out this application without the need of the store owner or the store employees doing it on behalf of them. Now, we want to enable these users, and we're going to use the Cognitive Services voice profiles so that we can actually read out where they are and what they need to do. But not only that, the store is based in Canada. Now, if you do not know, Canada has two official languages. It has French and English, both spoken and written. So we need to enable this application to be able to do both English and French. But firstly, we're just going to focus on the English. So what happens then when I click on first name?
Please enter your first name.
You can see and hear Sarah, the bot we just heard introduce herself earlier, speak, and it's telling the individual to please enter your first name. And then we go to last name,
Please enter your last name.
email,
Please enter your email address.
and
Please
phone.
enter your phone number.
So as you can see there, we've got lifelike voices coming from the cognitive services and speaking on when a user clicks into a particular input. Now, we also have the ability to change. What we can do then is we can go into the settings that I mentioned earlier, and we can then select a language. And I said we're going to stick with English for now. And then we can select a voice profile. So let's select Connor and go back. And then we can select first name.
Please enter your first name.
Now you're hearing Connor speak.
Please enter your last name. Please enter your email address. Please enter your phone number.
And again, we can go back in and customize it. Now we want to enable multiple voice profiles to allow some flexibility to the actual text store to decide how they want to customize their application's voices, as well as we want to enable languages. So firstly, let's get started with how we actually get the voices from Cognitive Services. Okay, so this is the Azure Cognitive Services Speech Studio. If you haven't ever seen this website before, I'll just give you a quick run through. Essentially, you have the speech to text area where you can obviously do speech and convert it to text, as well as you've got text to speech and then voice assistant. Now, what we're going to be focusing on is the text to speech area, and we're going to go into the audio content creation. Now this is going to open up our Speech Studio, and what this does is it shows you the files section. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, what files do you create? Well, I've created a folder called FlowJo, And within here, I have loads of text files, as you can see on the file type here. Now, how the Speech Studio works is you generate a text file, then you would select a voice profile, and that voice profile would then read out your text. So before I actually go into what I've done previously and to go through what we're going to be looking at in this demo, I'm going to go through the actual process of creating a text file. Cool, so all you do is hit new and the drop down opens, and then click on text file. This will open up a text file section for you. You have at the top here your file where you can add a new text file, etc. You can save, you can export, which we'll be definitely focusing on, as well as you've got templates, and then you've got auto predict and so on. But the most important part about this that you're going to be focusing on now is this play button, because this is how you play your voice profile that reads out what you put in your text area. And this is the text area that you're going to be manipulating. And as you see here, it says voice name. Now that's because there's no voice profile associated to this. So if I add, "Hi Flo Joe, nice to meet you," what I can do is I can highlight that section, and then I can come over to the right hand side, and you can see here it says language, and you can select different languages as well as the location of the accent of that individual voice profile. Now, if I select the three dots here, you actually get a better representation of the voice profiles that you can look at. And it also tells you their gender. It also tells you what location they are at. So for in this example, English, United States, it tells you if they have styles. Now, what does a style mean? Let's just select Jenny, for example. If I select Jenny, they have the default style, which everyone traditionally has with the public voice, but then they have the assistant style, the chat style, customer service, newscast, angry, cheerful, sad, and so on. Now this allows you to add emotion to your voice outputs, and your voice profiles can actually use emotion when they're reading the text off of the screen. So we've used Sarah in our demo already, so I'm going to select Sarah, and as you can see here, you've got voice profiles in 11 styles, as well as we have the natural default style. She's a female from the United States and speaks English. So if I select confirm, now you can see Sarah has actually been put in the brackets here because that's the voice profile that's going to be used to read out this. But I can change sections of it, so I can highlight nice to meet you, for example, change the speaking style, and then I could change that to excited, and then I can change Hi Flo Joe to, let's change that to unfriendly. Hi Flo Joe, nice to meet you type thing, right? So let's highlight this and then press play.
Hi, Flo Joe. Nice to meet you.
So as you can see there's differences in the actual speaking style, adding emotion to the output text. Now, once you've done that, then you can press enter and add a new line and start typing, and it will default back to the voice profile that you've already selected above, but you can highlight that. So let's just change that to rabbit, for example. And you can then select another voice profile, and again you can see that the new voice profile has been put in the brackets, and then you can essentially make a conversation, for example. Now what you're going to then be doing is you're going to put in the text that you want the individual voice profile to read out. But then you're going to want to export it, right? So you can obviously save it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come out of this and go into one that I've actually done, which is Sarah, which we looked at previously when I was explaining the application. And as you can see here, I have 4 lines. Please enter your first name, please enter your last name, please enter your email, and so on. Now, I've not put any types of voice on the Sarah profile, I've just specifically used the default voice output, as well as I then need to export this. Now, when I'm exporting this to use in my video, or when I'm exporting this to use in my application, what I have to do is hit export. And then what I can do is I can save it to the Azure Blob storage. Now, if you're wanting to free up space in your application, you could do that and call the Azure Blob storage from your application. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to export it to my local disk because I want my application to work in offline mode, and I want to be enabled. I want to have the ability to enable this voice audio in offline mode as well. So if I click export to local disk and press next, you're going to get this screen, which is going to ask you how you want to export it. You can export the text, you can export an SSML, you can export just the audio, and then you can decide on the audio format. Now, what I normally use is the 48K MP3. Then I would choose how I want my MP3s to be split up. Now, this is very important because you can have the whole conversation in one MP3, which would be the first option. But the second option is what I would recommend, is that it splits each of the MP3s up based on line. So please enter your first name by Sarah would have its own MP3. Then another one would be generated. Please enter your last name. And this is going to be important, and you're going to see why when we go into our application to actually reference these MP3s. So my recommendation would be select audio. You don't need the text. You've already got the text saved on here. Select 48K MP3 and then select each paragraph generates an audio. Now, let's take a look at the voices that I've downloaded and see how that looks on your actual PC then. So these are all zip files that I've downloaded, and I've extracted them all here. And let's use Sarah as an example again. So once you open that, you've got an audio and a summary. So if you go into that audio section, what I've done is I've gone through each of these individual MP3s and named them so that it's easily referenceable. Because when I upload these to Power Apps, I don't want the name that's been generated by the Azure Cognitive Services, because it's going to be hard for me to know what that particular person is, what language they speak, and what they're saying. So I've just made it simple for myself by renaming this. So I've got Sarah-English-email, Sarah-English-first name, so that I can easily understand that, right? When I'm on my application, I just know I'm going to be referring to Sarah English email, and Sarah is then going to read out the email section of that. Okay, cool. So now we have our MP3s. Let's head back over to our application and see how we put it all together. Right, so we are back to our demo application. Once I select the first input, the first name, I'm going to go to the on select section and look here, because on select is what is triggering our audio. Now, when we come into the on select section, we are resetting an audio. Now, what does that mean then? We're resetting first name audio. We want our audio control to be in its basic state, its original state. So we need to reset it. So if I come over to first name audio, you can see that there is a variable here that triggers it. Now, if I come back to my input, you can see I'm setting that variable to false, but then I'm setting it to true. Now, I've commented the code here, and I will put as an example demo into the description below the video, but to go through this, we're originally setting the audio back to its original state. We're then setting the variable to false because it may be true at some point. We need it to be false initially, and then we are setting it to true. Now, the reason we're doing this flip, we're going from false to true, is because true is what triggers the start. If this is true, the audio knows to start. So if it's false when we first click on it and then we change it to true, it's always going to go, okay, cool. The variable first name audio is now true. Start this audio. But how does this audio start then? Where does it actually get the MP3s from? So if we go into the media section, I've got a switch statement here, and I've got a var voice profile reference. Now, this variable is being set from the options section, which we'll go over later, but by default in the on start, I'm setting all of these variables for first name, last name, email, and phone to false. I'm setting the language to English, and I'm setting the voice profile to Sarah. So by default, the voice profile will come through as Sarah. So as you can see here, the match value, if you're not familiar with switches, you pass through the value that would be looked at, and then you would do a match value. So this would be Sarah, and then you pass through the match result. Now this match result is pointing to our MP3 file. So as you can remember from earlier, I renamed all of my MP3 files so it would be easy for me to understand and write and call my MP3 files from my application. Now I've got Sarah-English-first-name. So this is on the first name audio, and I know this is under Sarah, so it's really easy for me to separate this. And then I've got Leah, I've got Connor, and so on. Now, this particular MP3 file then is just simply uploaded into the media section. So if I go into the media section under audio, I've uploaded all of these MP3s. So you've got all of the Sarah ones there, Leah, Connor, and so on. And I've got all of these MP3s basically saved directly in the application. And as you can see, it's only 1.3 meg of 200 megabytes used. So it doesn't use a lot of space at all. So if you're considering using this for offline mode, it's a very viable option. Now, let's go back then. Okay, so we press our input. We then reset that audio to its original state, so it's at the beginning, nothing's been done to it. We set the variable to false, we then set the variable to true. It comes into our audio section, goes to start. The variable then is obviously true, so the audio starts. That then goes into the media section, which then checks the voice profile that we're using. It's currently Sarah. And then it comes into here and goes Sarah-English-first name. So it plays that particular audio file. Then, if I was to go into last name, it would do the same thing, but just for the last name audio. It would reset last name audio. It would set the last name audio variable to false, then true. We would then come into the last name audio. We would use the variable there, and then we would eventually end up in the media. And this time, instead of referencing first name, it's now just Sarah-English-last name. Awesome. So that is how you get the voices to work on trigger of a input. Once you press one, it goes from there, it resets it, changes the variable. You end up in the audio control, then it triggers the audio control, goes into media, and then references the MP3. So not hard, right? But how do we then cater for multiple voice profiles and multiple languages? Now, as you've been seeing here in my switch statements, I've been switching each particular name and referencing their MP3s. So if we go over to our options screen, you can see I've got a language drop down of English and French. So select English. And then I've got a voice profile. So once I select that, what's actually happening here is on the change of these, it's setting the variable language to the selected one. So for example, if I've changed to English, var language would then become English, as you can see here. And then what happens is I actually come into the items of the voice profile, and I use the variable language, and I check English, and then I list the English voice profile. So I've got Sarah, Leah, and Connor. And then I do the same with the French profiles. Okay, so what's happened then? I've selected a language. Let me just change this to French to just show you. And then the voice profiles for that particular language appear. Then what I do is I select a particular voice profile. So when that happens on change, I set the variable voice profile to the particular one that's selected, so that then when I come back over to here and I'm using my switch statement on my audio, the voice profile is then set to Sarah, and then it pulls the correct voice profile. So whenever you select a language and then a voice profile, every single one will trickle through, and every time you select one of these, it will reference the same voice profile as well as the MP3 that relates to it. Now, what I'm also doing is if I select a input, I've got hint text in here, right? As you can see, it says first name, but to cater for the two languages, if I scroll down, if I scroll up actually to hint text, I've got a switch statement for the var language, and I'm checking if it's English, and I put the first name, and then if it's French, then I put the French translation. And I do this for each of them. So if I go to phone, for example, and go to hint text again, I'm just switching based on the language and then doing the translation. So let's take a look at a French iteration of this. We've already seen from the initial demo how the English works. I come into here, I select French, I select a French voice profile, I come back, all of the hint text and the text down here as well as the button using the same switch statement process has changed the language to French. And then I would click on a particular input.
Veuillez saisir votre prénom.
And
Veuillez entrer votre nom de famille.
I'm now
Veuillez
getting
saisir votre adresse email.
a French speaker.
Veuillez entrer votre numéro de téléphone.
So if I come back into settings, I can then choose the Canadian accent style and come back, and
Veuillez saisir votre prénom.
you can see that
Veuillez entrer votre nom de famille.
it's extremely easy to transfer over from one language to another, as well as transfer from one voice profile to another.